Butter is the most consumed fat on Earth. Every year, the world produces roughly 11 million tons of it. In France, the average person eats 8 kilograms a year, nearly a stick a week. It goes into croissants, finishes sauces, and melts over steaks. For half the planet, butter is not an ingredient. It is practically a religion. But for the other half, specifically for more than 1 billion people in China, butter barely exists. It is not banned. It is not unknown. It simply never made it into the kitchen. Where a European reaches for a golden block of butter, a Chinese cook reaches for a plastic jug of peanut oil or rapeseed oil. Same meal, same hunger, completely different fat. And the reason why is far stranger than you might expect. The simplest answer is cost. Go to any Chinese supermarket and the math becomes immediately obvious. A small block of butter, roughly 200 grams, costs around 40 yuan. A 5-liter jug of peanut oil, enough to last a family weeks, costs about the same. The economics are not even close. But the reason butter is expensive is not arbitrary. It is a consequence of biology. To produce a single kilogram of butter, you need between 20 and 25 kilograms of fresh milk. That is the output of an entire cow for nearly a full day, concentrated into one small golden block. Vegetable oil, by comparison, is almost absurdly simple to produce. You take rapeseed or peanuts or soybeans, you crush them in a press, and oil flows out continuously. One process demands an enormous animal infrastructure, pasture land, dairy herds, milking schedules, breeding programs. The other demands a field and a machine. This gap in production cost is not a modern accident. It is a reflection of two fundamentally different agricultural civilizations that took shape thousands of years ago. Western Europe, particularly its northern regions, developed around pastoral farming. The climate was cool and wet, ideal for grass, less ideal for rice or soybeans. Cattle thrived. Dairy became central not just as food but as economic currency. The Vikings carried barrels of butter on their longships. Scandinavian farmers paid taxes in butter. And in medieval France, butter was so important that the Catholic Church sold special dispensations, allowing the faithful to eat it during Lent. And the money raised from those butter permits literally built the Tour de Beurre, the butter tower, at the Rouen Cathedral. Butter was wealth, butter was power, and over centuries it seeped into every corner of Western cuisine. From English shortbread to Austrian croissants to Italian risotto, finished with a generous knob stirred in at the last moment. French cuisine in particular elevated butter from a farm product to an art form. The entire classical sauce tradition, bechamel, hollandaise, beurre blanc, depends on butter's unique ability to emulsify, to create textures that no oil can replicate. A French chef without butter is like a painter without a brush. China's agricultural story went in the opposite direction. The vast river valleys of the Yellow River and the Yangtze were perfect for grain cultivation. Millet in the north, rice in the south. Land was precious and population density was high. Feeding a cow requires roughly 7 times the land needed to grow the same caloric value in grain. In a civilization where arable land meant survival, dedicating vast pastures to dairy cattle was an unthinkable luxury. Instead, Chinese farmers planted oilseed crops, rapeseed, sesame, soybeans, and pressed them for cooking fat. Soybeans alone became a cornerstone of Chinese agriculture, providing not only oil but also tofu, soy sauce, and fermented pastes that formed the flavor backbone of an entire cuisine. The oil was cheap, abundant, and required no animal infrastructure at all. It was the rational choice, made not by any single emperor or policy, but by millions of households over thousands of years. But here is where the story gets more interesting. Because the Chinese did know about butter. More than 3,000 years ago, the nomadic peoples of northern China, herders who lived on the steppes and raised cattle, sheep, and horses, produced a form of butter they called su. It was considered a luxury, a food of extraordinary richness and nutritional value. Buddhist texts from the Tang dynasty even used su as a metaphor for the highest form of enlightenment, the purest essence distilled from something raw. So butter was not unknown. It was not foreign. It existed within Chinese culture for millennia. And yet it vanished from the mainstream Chinese kitchen almost completely. Why? The answer lies in the physics of the wok. Chinese cooking is not gentle. It is violent. The technique called chow, what the West loosely translates as stir-frying, requires temperatures that would terrify a French chef. A properly heated wok reaches well above 200 degrees Celsius. Street vendors in Guangzhou routinely cook over jet engine-like burners that push temperatures even higher. At that heat, oil shimmers, food sears in seconds, and the elusive wok, hey, the breath of the wok, that smoky, charred flavor, emerges. This is the signature of Chinese cooking, and it demands a fat that can survive extreme heat. Think of the wok as a furnace. You do not feed a furnace with candle wax. Butter cannot survive it. The fatal weakness of butter is its smoke point, roughly 150 degrees Celsius. Push it beyond that threshold and it does not just smoke, it burns. The milk solids carbonize, turning acrid and bitter. The flavor that makes butter so beautiful in a French beurre blanc becomes a liability the moment it hits a Chinese wok. It is like trying to run diesel in a gasoline engine. The fuel is fine, the machine is wrong. Peanut oil, by contrast, has a smoke point above 220 degrees. Refined rapeseed oil is similar. These oils do not just tolerate the violent heat of wok cooking, they thrive in it. They carry flavor without contributing their own. They allow the Maillard reaction to work its magic on the surface of meat and vegetables without any interference from burning milk proteins. The wok and vegetable oil evolved together, each shaping the other, until the partnership became inseparable. And then there is the problem of storage. Butter is, at its core, an emulsion, fat suspended in water, held together by milk proteins. That water content makes it biologically fragile. Exposed to air, butter oxidizes. Left at room temperature, it goes rancid within days. In a humid Sichuan summer, an unwrapped block of butter would start to turn within hours. To move butter reliably from a factory to a supermarket shelf requires an unbroken cold chain. Refrigerated trucks, refrigerated warehouses, refrigerated display cases, from the moment of production to the moment of purchase. One broken link, one truck with a failing compressor on a summer highway, and an entire shipment becomes waste. This infrastructure is expensive, energy-intensive, and in many parts of China only became widely available in the last 2 decades. Vegetable oil, meanwhile, sits in a sealed plastic jug on an unrefrigerated shelf and remains perfectly stable for a year or more. No special handling, no temperature monitoring, no expiration anxiety. In a country where hundreds of millions of people still shop at open-air markets without any refrigeration at all, butter was not just inconvenient, it was logistically impossible. Now, a sharp observer might raise an objection. There is a form of butter that solves nearly every one of these problems. It is called ghee, clarified butter with all the water and milk solids removed. Ghee has a smoke point above 250 degrees, higher than almost any vegetable oil. It does not require refrigeration. It lasts for months at room temperature, and it has been the primary cooking fat of India for more than 3,000 years. India is right next to China. Indian cuisine uses intense heat. Indian agriculture was also grain-based with enormous population density. So if ghee solved the smoke point problem, the storage problem, and the cost per calorie problem, why did China not adopt it? This is the moment the story shifts, because the answer is no longer about chemistry or economics, it is about biology. Roughly 65% of the global adult population is lactose intolerant to some degree. But that number is not evenly distributed. In Northern Europe, where dairy farming dominated for millennia, only about 5% of the population is lactose intolerant. In East Asia, the figure is above 90%. This is not a flaw. It is an adaptation. The Chinese population, through thousands of years of grain-based agriculture with minimal dairy exposure, simply never developed the widespread genetic mutation that allows adults to digest lactose efficiently. Europeans who could digest milk had a survival advantage in cold pastoral environments, where dairy provided crucial calories through long winters. The Chinese had no such pressure. Their calories came from rice paddies and soybean fields, not from udders. When your civilization runs on grain, there is no advantage to digesting milk. So even if ghee removed the practical barriers, the deeper barrier remained. China did not just lack the infrastructure for butter. It lacked the biological relationship with dairy itself. No large-scale dairy herds meant no cheap milk. No cheap milk meant no butter tradition. No butter tradition meant no evolutionary pressure to tolerate lactose. And no lactose tolerance meant no cultural desire to build the dairy industry in the first place. It was a self-reinforcing loop, thousands of years in the making, with no single decision point and no single person to blame. What we call a cooking fat is really a fossilized choice. A decision made so long ago that no one remembers making it. When a French chef reaches for butter, she is not just choosing a flavor. She is reaching into a 10,000-year history of cattle domestication on the cool grasslands of Northern Europe, a history written in cream and salt and slow, gentle heat. When a Cantonese cook pours peanut oil into a wok, he is not just choosing convenience. He is channeling a civilization that fed 1 billion people by turning every available acre into cropland instead of pasture. A civilization that learned to coax extraordinary flavor from nothing more than oil, fire, and speed. Neither choice is better, neither is more natural. They are simply the answers that two different worlds arrived at when faced with the same question: how do we make food taste extraordinary with what we have? One world had cows. The other had seeds. And from that single fork in the road, two entirely different philosophies of flavor were born.